watching World News Program, coming to you live from Algiers with me, Miriam Zian, to the headlines. Just a few hours before a new round of talks in Geneva, Donald Trump says he prefers diplomacy with Iran to reach a solution. And Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says a deal with the US is within reach. In the Gaza Strip, 2 people were killed and others wounded by Israeli fire in Khan Yunis. The government media office warns that the enclave is facing signs of a worsening humanitarian crisis. Meanwhile, the Committee to Protect Journalists holds the Zionist entity responsible for the deaths of 2/3 of journalists worldwide during 2025. The UN Security Council condemns the continued violations by the Rapid Support Forces in Kordofan, affirming that their targeting of aid convoys amounts to war crimes and imposes sanctions on the force's commander and other senior leaders. Regarding the developments in the Ukraine war, Russia confirms the deaths of 7 people following a Ukrainian attack on the Smolensk Oblast. Volodymyr Zelensky says a meeting between Ukrainian negotiators and a U.S. delegation is scheduled for tomorrow, Thursday, and Russia's claims that Kiev is seeking to acquire nuclear weapons are an attempt to pressure it. And first, in our news file, a U.S. official said that Steve Witkoff, the special envoy of U.S. President Donald Trump, stated during a meeting on Tuesday that the U.S. administration is demanding that any nuclear agreement with Iran remain in force indefinitely. The U.S. news website Axios reported on Wednesday that 2 other officials familiar with the remarks confirmed what Witkoff said during the private meeting. The U.S. president has threatened to launch military strikes against Iran if Tehran and Washington fail to reach an agreement to resolve the long-standing dispute over Iran's nuclear program. And tensions and diplomacy collide in Geneva as Iran and the United States return to the negotiating table over Tehran's nuclear program. After weeks of uncertainty, both sides say a deal is possible, but deep mistrust and high stakes make these talks one of the most closely watched diplomatic efforts in the world today. Nabil Khazini has the report.
For a moment that could define the next chapter in one of the world's most enduring geopolitical rivalries, Iran and the United States are again sitting down for nuclear negotiations, this time in Geneva, with diplomats saying the deal might be within reach and critics warning the rift remains deep. Yesterday in Tehran, Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi left for Geneva. At the head of his negotiating team, he described the talks as a historic opportunity and said a fair, equitable agreement was within reach, but only if diplomacy is prioritized.
I'm going to Geneva this afternoon in order to have the 3rd round of our talks with the U.S. team. And we have made some progress last time. We were able to find some sort of understandings. And I think based on those understandings, we can build something.
In Washington, Donald Trump has repeatedly cast his preference as diplomatic, saying he wants a solution through diplomacy rather than open conflict. Yet his rhetoric in recent speeches has blended that message within tough warnings about Iran's nuclear ambitions and missile capabilities.
For decades, it had been the policy of the United States never to allow Iran to obtain a nuclear weapon. Many decades. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy.
For Iran, the right to enrich uranium, even symbolically, and to dissolve its own enriched stockpiles inside its borders remain core demands. Iranian leaders argue that any credible deal must respect these points and avoid restrictions on other sovereign defense capacities. If successful, Geneva's talks could open a small window toward easing tensions between two wary capitals. If they fail, they may reveal just how deep the divide really is. Either way, the world is watching, and neither side is ready to look away.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on Tuesday that reaching an agreement with the United States would become attainable if priority is given to diplomatic solutions, 2 days ahead, or 1 day ahead of expected talks between the two sides in Geneva. In a post on the platform X on Wednesday, Araghchi said there is a historic opportunity to reach an unprecedented agreement that addresses mutual concerns and achieves shared interests. He added that Iran will resume the talks with determination to reach a fair and equitable agreement as soon as possible, as he put it, 1 day before anticipated negotiations between Tehran and Washington in Geneva. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf warned the United States that all options remain on the table. The Iranian news agency Tasnim news agency quoted Ghalibaf on Wednesday as saying that his country is ready either for diplomacy based on dignity or for a defense that would leave regret, in his words. He added that Tehran is open to negotiations that preserve the dignity of the Iranian people and take mutual interests into account. And Reuters reported, citing a diplomatic source on Wednesday, that Turkey is assessing all aspects of possible measures that could be taken in the event of a conflict between its neighbor Iran and the United States. According to the source, all dimensions of potential steps are being evaluated in case of negative developments. Turkey, which shares a border with Iran, has previously affirmed its opposition to any military intervention in Tehran, stressing that it does not want instability in the region. In occupied Palestine, one Palestinian was killed by fire from an Israeli drone near areas controlled by Israeli forces east of Deir al-Balah in central Gaza, according to Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. Earlier, as well, a Palestinian was killed and others were injured in a strike carried out by an Israeli drone overnight in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza. Palestinian local sources said an Israeli drone targeted a group of civilians in the Al-Ard, a Zaytun area south of Khan Yunis, killing one Palestinian and wounding others. This comes as Israeli forces carried out demolitions of residential buildings and artillery shelling in Gaza City and Khan Yunis. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza has announced that 9 bodies, including 6 retrieved from under the rubble and 4 injured people, were brought to Gaza hospitals over the past 24 hours. In its daily statistical statement on Wednesday, the ministry said that the death toll resulting from Israeli violations of the ceasefire agreement since October 11 has reached approximately 618 people, in addition to 732 bodies recovered and 1,663 injured. The government media office in Gaza said the suspension of operations by the World Central Kitchen comes amid severe field obstacles imposed by Israeli authorities, including reducing the number of trucks allowed to bring in food supplies from 25 per day to only 5. In a statement issued Wednesday, the office said the organization is facing pressure to purchase raw materials from inside Israel instead of receiving shipments from Egypt, which would alter the nature of humanitarian supply and raise costs. It warned that Gaza is facing signs of a worsening humanitarian crisis if restrictions on aid flows continue. The United States, or the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees in the Near East stressed that protecting civilians in Gaza is an urgent humanitarian priority amid the deteriorating conditions in the enclave. In a statement posted Wednesday on its X account, UNRWA underscored the need to ensure safe and sustained access for humanitarian aid to Palestinians, adding that enabling humanitarian workers and protecting facilities and infrastructure are essential conditions for continuing vital services. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas described the U.S. step to provide consular services inside the settlement of Efrat, built on occupied West Bank land, as a dangerous precedent and a de facto recognition of the legitimacy of Israeli settlement activity. In a statement issued on Wednesday, Hamas said the move reveals what it called a stark contradiction in U.S. positions rejecting the annexation of the West Bank, while taken on the ground measures that reinforce annexation and entrench Israeli sovereignty over occupied Palestinian territory.
The American move to provide consular services within Efrat settlement in the Gush Etzion bloc built on West Bank land represents a dangerous precedent and a blatant alignment with the occupation's Judaization plans and a practical recognition of the legitimacy of settlements and the occupation's control over the West Bank.
The Committee to Protect Journalists announced that 129 journalists and media workers were killed worldwide in 2025, marking a new record toll. In a statement Wednesday, Executive Director Jody Ginsburg said the unprecedented killings come at a time when access to information is more vital than ever, holding Israel responsible for roughly 2/3 of the deaths. She stressed that everyone is at risk when journalists are killed for their reporting. The Ceasefire Supervision Committee in Lebanon, known as the Mechanism, held its 17th meeting on Wednesday at the headquarters of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon in the town of Naqoura in southern Lebanon. The meeting, chaired by the committee's deputy head, French General Valentin Saylor, reviewed military and field developments related to the cessation of hostilities in southern Lebanon amid continued Israeli violations. The Lebanese army said Israeli soldiers opened fire Tuesday toward the vicinity of an observation post the army was establishing in the border area of Sarda in the Mar'ayun district, southern Lebanon. In a statement Wednesday, the army said the incident coincided with threats broadcast by an Israeli drone ordering Lebanese soldiers to leave the area, adding that command instructed troops to remain at the post and respond to the sources of fire. The army also reported that Israeli forces carried out 2 explosions Tuesday night in the town of Adaysa and another near the outskirts of Marwahin and Sihin in southern Lebanon. The United Nations Security Council condemned the continued attacks by the Rapid Support Forces and their destabilizing actions in the Kordofan region of central Sudan, denouncing violations and abuses committed against civilians, including arbitrary arrests and conflict-related sexual violence attributed to forces loyal to Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hamiti. In a statement issued Wednesday, the Council referred to atrocities committed by the Rapid Support Forces in Al-Fashir, North Kordofan, including systematic killings, mass displacement, summary executions, and the targeting of civilians on an ethnic basis, stressing the need to hold all those responsible accountable. In the same context, the Security Council said that RSF attacks on a World Food Programme aid convoys earlier this month could amount to war crimes. Council members called on all parties to respect and protect humanitarian workers and their premises in accordance with international obligations and humanitarian law, and stressed the need to hold repeated drone attacks targeting civilians and civilian infrastructure. The Security Council announced the inclusion of 4 senior RSF leaders in Sudan on the international sanctions list, including Commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo. A statement issued Wednesday said the decision imposes a global travel ban, asset freezes, and restrictions on financial transactions involving the listed individuals as part of international efforts to secure ceasefire and protect civilians in Sudan, particularly in Darfur and other conflict areas. Human Rights Watch said the Rapid Support Forces committed serious abuses against people with disabilities during their attack on Al-Fashir in North Darfur, Western Sudan, noting that some were directly targeted, killed, or mistreated because of their disabilities. According to Reuters, the organization cited testimonies from survivors and relatives of victims, indicating that RSF fighters targeted individuals due to physical or mental disabilities, accusing some of being wounded combatants while mocking others as crazy or incomplete, reflecting what the report described as a systematic pattern of discrimination and humiliation. Members of the Peace and Security Council of the African Union stressed the growing challenges facing Africa that directly affect food security, including armed conflicts, climate change, rising food and energy prices, and geopolitical tensions. During a consultative meeting held Wednesday, participants discussed ways to strengthen coordination and cooperation between UN agencies and the African Union to address these challenges. Algeria's ambassador and permanent representative to the African Union, Mohamed Khaled, emphasized that food security is a cornerstone of stability and peace on the continent, praising Algeria's efforts to ensure national food security and calling for strengthened African sovereignty, support for climate-resilient agriculture, and enhanced cooperation between the African Union and UN agencies based in Rome. Algeria welcomed the statement issued by the authorities of the Vatican City announcing that Pope Leo will pay an official visit to Algeria at the invitation of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. A statement from the Algerian presidency said that the visit will strengthen bonds of friendship, trust, and mutual understanding between Algeria and the Vatican and open new horizons for cooperation, reflecting their shared belief in building a world grounded in peace, dialogue, and justice in the face of current global challenges. President Tebboune also chaired a meeting to assess preparations for the anticipated papal visit. Algerian Prime Minister Sifir Ghraib stressed the importance of joint action and coordination among stakeholders to create new momentum in the banking sector and support economic projects in line with Algeria's strategic orientations and ongoing economic reforms. While presiding over the installation ceremony of Mohamed Lamine Labou as the new governor of the Bank of Algeria appointed by President Tebboune, Ghraib called for teamwork to enhance financial system performance, support growth, and strengthen Algeria's economic standing amid regional and international challenges. Algeria's Council of the Nation Speaker Azzouz Nasri said the Western Sahara issue remains a decolonization matter governed by the principle of people's right to self-determination under UN resolutions. In a post on X marking the 50th anniversary of the proclamation of the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, he reaffirmed Algeria's steadfast support for international legitimacy and liberation causes. Meanwhile, dozens of Spanish political, trade union, and civil society organizations called on Morocco to immediately end what they described as its illegal presence in Western Sahara. At a press conference in Spain's Basque region, 40 organizations issued a joint statement urging Spanish authorities to take effective measures enabling the Sahrawi people to exercise their right to self-determination through a free and fair referendum and renew their support for the Sahrawi struggle for independence. And in other news, the governor of Smolensk Oblast, Vasily Anuhin, said on Wednesday that 7 employees at a fertilizer plant were killed and 10 others injured following a Ukrainian drone attack on the region. The Russian local official added via social media that the victims were targeted while carrying out their professional duties. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation announced that its forces destroyed Ukrainian ammunition depots on Kharkiv Oblast, in addition to a shelter for Ukrainian forces between the areas of Kramatorsk and Druzhkivka overnight. In a statement issued Wednesday, the ministry said Russian multiple launch rocket systems destroyed ammunition depots, command points for Ukrainian drones, as well as concentrations of military equipment and personnel belonging to Ukrainian forces in Kharkiv Oblast. It also reported the destruction of a shelter housing Ukrainian troops between Kramatorsk and Druzhkivka. Deputy Chairman of the Russian Security Council Dmitry Medvedev warned that Russia would be forced to use all types of weapons, including non-strategic nuclear weapons, against targets in Ukraine if Kiev were to obtain nuclear technology. In press remarks to Russian media Tuesday evening, Medvedev said that information from Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service revealed alleged intentions by France and the United Kingdom to transfer nuclear technology to what he described as the Kiev regime. He considered such a move as a direct transfer of nuclear weapons to a country at war, constituting a violation of international law and a fundamental shift in the situation. Ukrainian negotiator Rustem Umerov is set to meet Thursday in Geneva with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner ahead of anticipated new trilateral talks with the Russians scheduled for March, according to Ukrainian authorities. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the meeting aims to prepare for a trilateral gathering with Russia expected in early March in an effort to find a solution to the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Umerov's spokesperson confirmed that the Ukrainian-American meeting will take place in Geneva. Later on, Zelensky stated that Russia's claims that Kiev seeks to acquire nuclear weapons are merely an attempt to pressure Ukraine. Speaking at a joint press conference Wednesday with Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre, Zelensky affirmed that Ukraine does not possess nuclear weapons and said Moscow's allegations come ahead of the anticipated trilateral meeting with representatives of Russia, the United States, and the United States in early March. The United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution calling for an immediate, full and unconditional ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, renewing the call for a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in accordance with international law and the UN Charter. The resolution adopted on the 4th anniversary of the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war received support from 107 countries, while 12 voted against and 51 abstained. It stressed the need for a full exchange of prisoners of war, the release of all unlawfully detained prisoners, and the return of all detainees and civilians who were forcibly transferred or deported, including children, as an important confidence-building measure between the parties. U.S. President Donald Trump delivered the longest State of the Union address ever before members of Congress, breaking the record set by Democrat Bill Clinton in 2000 at 1 hour and 20 minutes. What's remarkable about Trump's speech isn't its record length, but rather the significant political, economic, and social controversy it has generated. Usama Ayadi has more details.
Donald Trump delivered the longest State of the Union address in modern U.S. history, speaking for nearly 1 hour and 47 minutes in a speech that quickly ignited political and media controversy at home and abroad. The president used the marathon address to defend his administration's first-year record in his second term, portraying himself as the driving force behind what he described as a historic economic and security revival. He pointed to lower inflation, rising wages, falling fuel prices, and what he called the complete shutdown of southern border.
After 4 years in which millions and millions of illegal aliens poured across our borders, totally unvetted and unchecked, we now have the strongest and most secure border in American history by far.
But an independent fact-checking report cast doubt on several of those claims, concluding that parts of the speech relied on exaggeration, particularly on the economy, healthcare, and energy. While inflation eased, the report noted it has not dropped as sharply as Trump suggested, with housing, electricity, and medical costs still climbing. Claims of record low gasoline prices and pharmaceutical discounts of up to 900% were also challenged as misleading or unsupported by nationwide data.
The president had a pretty tall task. He has to convince people that his approach is the right approach. And it's a challenge in an election year when he's got his approval numbers dropping. The economy is not in a recession, but certainly not growing.
The address deepened partisan tensions on Capitol Hill. Roughly 30 Democrats boycotted the session, while others accused the president of distorting facts and sidestepping pressing issues, including the war in Ukraine and sensitive domestic matters. Democrat Representative Ilhan Omar was among his most vocal critiques, and Representative Al Green was removed from the chamber after staging a protest. Political analysts say the speech appeared designed to energize Trump's base ahead of the November midterm elections, as recent polls show slipping approval ratings and growing voter concerns over the economy and immigration.
The end of our program. Thanks for watching.